Welcome to Life Stories, where the people we trust the most sometimes become the ones who break us the deepest. What would you do if your child's life was hanging by a thread and the only people who could help chose to look away? This is not just a story about betrayal. It's about silence that wounds deeper than words, love that must be earned in a home that should have given it freely, and a woman who discovers that sometimes family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when the world disappears. Stay with us, because what begins with heartbreak will lead to a moment of reckoning so powerful, it might just change the way you look at love, loyalty, and what it truly means to come home. Now let's step into the story of Claire Monroe and the day she stopped asking for permission to be loved. It was snowing in Portland the night Claire Monroe stopped believing in the concept of family. She stood at the window of her small apartment, watching the city lights flicker beneath the falling snow. Inside, the radiator hummed, barely cutting through the cold. On the couch, her daughter Lily lay curled under a worn quilt, her breathing soft but uneven. Claire glanced at the scar that curved beneath Lily's ear, a reminder of the emergency surgery that saved her life 3 months ago. Outside, the world looked peaceful, but peace had always been a luxury Claire couldn't afford. Not when love came with conditions. Not when blood turned its back when it mattered most. Claire was 32, the founder of a modest but growing interior design studio. She turned cluttered cafes into sanctuaries and dull apartments into cozy retreats. Her work wasn't flashy, but it was intimate, designed to make people feel safe. Maybe because safety was the one thing she never had growing up. Her parents, Richard and Elaine Monroe, ran a high-end furniture company in the Pacific Northwest. Their home was a modern mansion nestled in the hills of Lake Oswego, filled with glass, art, and enough cold air to keep emotions at bay. Claire's brother Blake was the golden child, slick, charming, and carefully curated for public admiration. He was the type of man who wore tailored suits to brunch and signed emails with his full name, including middle initial. Their parents adored him. Claire? She was nice, practical, quiet, the filler between their pride and joy. When Claire was 16 and got into the art and design program at NYU, her mother's only reaction was, "That's far. I hope you've thought this through." When Blake got into a community college 3 miles from home, they hired a band and threw a catered party. Claire learned early. Effort wasn't the currency of love in her family. Performance was. But she stopped caring. Or at least she thought she had. She built her life brick by brick. She met Josh while working on a lighting system for a studio loft renovation. They married the next year. When Lily was born, Claire felt something she'd never known, love that didn't need to be earned. Lily's laugh could soften concrete. Her eyes, curious and deep, were exactly like Claire's. For a while, they were happy in their small apartment with second-hand furniture and the sound of the park across the street. They didn't have much, but it felt enough, until it wasn't. One October morning, Lily collapsed while coloring. Her heartbeat raced, her skin turned cold, and the hospital confirmed what Claire had feared, a mass near Lily's lung. The surgery needed to happen fast, and it would cost over $90,000. They had no insurance. Claire had postponed it again and again, thinking they had time. Now time was bleeding out. She sold what she could. Josh sold his pickup. Friends helped. Jenna, her college roommate, wired $500 with a note. "You saved my heart in college. Let me try to return the favor." Ethan, a new employee, gave up his laptop savings. Even neighbors chipped in. They raised nearly $60,000 in days. But it wasn't enough, and so Claire did what she never thought she would do again. She dialed her mother. Elaine answered with that tone, warm enough for appearances, cool enough to bruise. Claire told her everything, begged just for a loan, just for Lily. There was a pause. Then Elaine said, "Claire, this is really bad timing. Your father and I have the company's 40th anniversary gala next weekend. We've invited over 200 guests. I can't just redirect that kind of money. It would look terrible." Claire didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just said thank you and hung up. But a week later, a box arrived at her office. Inside was a thin check for $2,500 and a note. "We hope this helps a little. Wishing Lily a speedy recovery. Mom and Dad." Claire stared at it, her fingers trembling. It wasn't the amount, it was the insult. She never deposited the check. They saved Lily without them. Thanks to strangers, friends, and the in-laws Claire once underestimated. Josh's parents, Susan and Tom, sold their house to cover the rest. They moved into a small rental on the edge of the city and said simply, "As long as Lily's okay, that's home." Claire promised herself she would never ask her family for anything again. And more than that, she would rise. And she did. She rebuilt her company, pitched to bigger clients, took online courses. She went from neighborhood cafes to boutique hotels in Santa Fe. Word spread. A feature in Modern Spaces called her the quiet force redefining design. She smiled at that. Quiet, yes, but not small. Then Voices of Resilience called. The producers had seen her story online. They wanted to film an interview. She agreed, reluctantly. On camera, she told the truth, not with anger, but clarity. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. The episode aired on a Thursday night. By Monday, thousands had shared it. And then the storm came. Reddit threads pieced together the details. Local bloggers connected her story to Richard and Elaine Monroe. Within days, Monroe Living was flooded with one-star reviews. Clients pulled contracts. Blake's social media turned to dust. The real estate mogul he was supposed to marry deleted every photo and quietly canceled the wedding. That's when the letter came. From Elaine, handwritten, pale yellow paper, neat handwriting. "We've lost everything. Blake's out of work. The store is collapsing. The bank is seizing the house. Please, if there's anything you can do." Claire read it 3 times before tucking it into a drawer. But she didn't throw it away, because something inside her was still waiting. Not for revenge, not even for closure, but for understanding. She didn't want them to suffer. She just wanted them to finally see. And then the call came. Blake, his voice hoarse, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "What did you do?" Claire leaned back in her chair. "I told the truth." "You ruined us." She paused, her voice quiet. "No, you did that yourselves." "What would you do if the family who abandoned your child came back asking for mercy?" Is there a point where forgiveness becomes a betrayal to yourself? But what Claire didn't expect was that the past still had one secret left to reveal, and it wasn't finished with her yet. Continue to part 2. Claire sat on the edge of her bed, the city's dim glow washing over the room. Portland's rain tapped against the window, rhythmic and relentless, like her thoughts. On the nightstand, her phone buzzed again, another missed call from her mother. 6 in 2 days. She hadn't responded. Not because she didn't feel something, but because she did. Rage, sorrow, the cruel pull of history, and underneath it all, a strange, unwanted ache. The kind of ache you only feel when someone you once loved begs, even if they don't deserve to. Josh leaned against the doorway, watching her. "You okay?" Claire nodded, but the lie hung heavy in the air. He stepped in, sat beside her, and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You don't have to carry this alone." But she did, because it wasn't about her parents anymore. It was about everything they had once stood for, and everything Claire had tried not to become. The next morning, she stood inside the conference room on the 3rd floor of Monroe's studio, waiting. A black suitcase rested on the glass table, sealed and ready. Her parents had agreed to come in person. Claire had insisted, not to shame them, but to give them one last chance to face what they had turned away from. At precisely 10 a.m., the elevator dinged. The door opened. Richard and Elaine walked in, thinner, older, shadows of the people they had once been. No designer clothes, no diamond necklaces. Just aging skin, stiff suits, and eyes that refused to meet hers. Claire stayed silent as they sat down. "This is the amount you asked for," she said, gesturing toward the suitcase. "It will cover the mortgage and your immediate debts." Elaine nodded, slowly. "Claire, thank you. You don't know what this means to us." Claire folded her hands. "I do. That's why I'm giving it to you." There was a pause. "But," she continued, "once you walk out of this room, I need you to understand something. You are no longer my family. You will never ask me for help again. You will never involve yourselves in my life or Lily's. This is the last time." Elaine opened her mouth, but Richard held up a hand. "We understand," he said quietly. Claire nodded. "Then we're done here." They stood. Elaine hesitated, looking at Claire like she wanted to say something more, but she didn't. She picked up the suitcase, and they left. Claire didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, staring at the empty chair across from her. A piece of her still hoped they would turn around. They didn't. That night, Claire curled up beside Lily, brushing strands of hair from her daughter's forehead. Lily stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Mom? I'm here, baby." Lily yawned. "I had a dream. You were painting a big wall, but when you were done, it turned into a door." Claire smiled faintly. "Did you open it?" Lily nodded. "Yeah. There was a garden. It smelled like cookies." Claire kissed her cheek. "Sounds perfect." But her heart wasn't still. Something about the dream clung to her, like a whisper she couldn't quite catch. 2 weeks passed. Life began settling again, until one morning a certified envelope arrived at the office, addressed to Claire. No return address. Inside, a notarized legal document. She skimmed the first page, then again. Her hands started to shake. It was a revocation of guardianship, filed by her parents. Not for Lily, for Claire. Her parents had disowned her, officially, legally. At first, she laughed. It was absurd. She was an adult. It didn't matter. But then she saw the second document, something older, a trust agreement. Claire had been listed as a co-beneficiary on a dormant family trust fund her grandfather left behind. She hadn't known. No one had ever told her. And now she wasn't. She read the fine print. It had been amended. 3 days after the studio interview aired, Blake was now listed as the sole heir. Her chest tightened. Not because she wanted the money, but because even now, when there was nothing left to lose, they still found a way to erase her. Josh found her sitting in the backyard, barefoot, her hands buried in the cold soil of the garden beds. "Claire?" She didn't look at him. "They went through the trouble of disowning me," she said softly, "after everything." Josh knelt beside her. "You don't need their legacy." "I know," she whispered, "but it wasn't even about the money. It's like they needed to make it official, like they couldn't rest until they erased me completely." Josh was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "Do you want to fight it?" Claire looked at him. "If I do, I become them. Or you show them that silence has consequences." She didn't answer. That night, she found herself staring at the old envelope again. Her mother's letter, tucked into the drawer. The handwriting shaky but clear. Claire had built a life on walking away with dignity, but maybe this time, just once, dignity wasn't enough. She opened her laptop and began to type. Not a legal reply, not a press release, but a letter to her daughter. "Lily, if you ever wonder why I walked away from the people who raised me, I want you to know this. It wasn't because I hated them. It was because I loved you more. More than their money. More than their approval. More than the ache inside me that still wanted to believe they'd change. I walked away because I needed to protect you from the lie I spent my whole life trying to survive. That love must be earned, and that being quiet means being invisible. You are not invisible. You are everything. And I will never let you forget it." Claire saved the file. Then she deleted the trust document. She chose Lily. Again. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved to protect yourself or someone else? What did it cost you, and was it worth it? But Claire's decision would come with a price. One she never expected, and one she wouldn't face alone. Continue to the next chapter. Spring arrived in Portland with quiet grace. The kind of season that doesn't announce itself with fireworks, but with a slow thaw, cracks in the ice, the scent of earth returning, a single flower pushing through frozen soil. Claire Monroe stood in the backyard of her new home, a cup of coffee warming her hands. Lily's laughter echoed from inside, where she and Josh were building a pillow fort in the living room. The house wasn't grand, but it was theirs. Light-filled, modest, and full of a kind of peace Claire had never known growing up. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was no longer running. But healing, she had learned, didn't always arrive wrapped in a clean bow. Sometimes it came slowly, sometimes it came through fire. The letter came on a Tuesday. It wasn't from her parents. It wasn't even from Blake. It was from an attorney. Claire nearly tossed it in the trash, assuming it was another corporate inquiry. But something made her open it. Inside, a formal notification that her mother, Elaine, had been diagnosed with a rapidly progressing neurological disease. Terminal. And that, per her final wishes, Claire had been listed as next of kin. Not Blake. Claire. The final line of the letter hit her hardest. She asked if you would come. She said she needed to tell you something. In person. Claire sat at her kitchen table for a long time, the letter spread open beside her untouched tea. Why now? After everything? Josh found her there, staring at the paper like it might catch fire. She handed it to him silently. He read it, then placed a gentle hand over hers. You don't have to go, he said softly, but Claire already knew she would. It wasn't about closure anymore. It was about finishing a story that had begun long before she could speak. 2 days later, Claire walked into the assisted living facility tucked between cedar trees on the outskirts of the city. The hall smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic. A nurse led her down a quiet corridor. The sound of a piano drifted from somewhere far away. Elaine was sitting in a wheelchair by the window, her hair thinner, her once fierce eyes dimmed. She looked older than her age, fragile in a way Claire had never seen. Claire, her mother said, her voice raspy, a hint of disbelief in it. You came. I did. A silence settled between them. Not cold, just tired. I wasn't sure if I'd ever see you again, Elaine said. Claire didn't respond. Elaine coughed gently, then reached into the drawer beside her and pulled out a small velvet box. She handed it to Claire with trembling fingers. I kept this for years. I wasn't sure why. Maybe guilt, maybe hope. Claire opened it. Inside was a tiny silver locket, the kind sold in boutique shops with cheap chains and fragile clasps. But inside it was a photo. A younger Claire, 8 years old, wearing a Halloween costume she had sewn herself, a little fairy with crooked wings, and on the other side, a note, folded so small it was nearly unreadable. In Claire's own child handwriting, I hope one day you'll love me just because I'm me. Claire swallowed hard. I found it after you left for college, Elaine said, her voice cracking. I read it once a year, every year, but I never told you. I didn't know how. Claire looked up. You always knew how, you just didn't want to. Elaine's eyes filled. You're right. I thought being strong meant being silent. I thought praise would make you soft, and I was wrong about everything. Claire didn't answer, not yet. Elaine looked out the window. I loved you, you know, in my way, but I didn't know how to show it. Your brother, he gave us something easy to brag about. But you were quiet. You asked hard questions. You saw through things. It scared me. Claire stood, walking slowly to the window beside her. She looked at the same view her mother saw, gray clouds, bare branches, the hint of spring in the breeze. Lily's strong, she said quietly. She doesn't have to earn love. She just gets it. Elaine smiled, weakly. Good. I'm glad. I had to teach myself that. I had to teach her that, because no one taught me. Elaine's lips trembled. I know. I'm sorry, Claire. Not because I'm dying. I'm sorry because I wasted so many years loving you in secret and hating myself in silence. They sat in stillness. And then Claire did something unexpected. She reached out and took her mother's hand. It was light, hollow-boned, but it gripped back. I don't forgive you, Claire whispered. But I'm not here for revenge either. I'm here because I don't want Lily to grow up seeing bitterness passed down like inheritance. Elaine nodded. I understand. I hope you do. Claire stayed until nightfall. She didn't cry. She just sat beside the woman who had birthed her, failed her, and at the very end tried to find her way back. Elaine passed away 3 weeks later. Claire didn't attend the funeral. But she did send flowers. Lily helped her pick them. Daisies. Claire's favorite as a child. Simple. Unpretentious. What were they for? Lily asked, as they dropped the bouquet at the front gate of the now shuttered Monroe mansion. Claire looked at her daughter. They were for goodbye, she said, and for peace. Years passed. Claire's company grew. Lily grew taller, sharper, braver. Susan and Tom moved into the guest house. their laughter still the first sound Claire heard most mornings. Josh opened a second office for his firm, and Claire began teaching part-time, design, but also storytelling through space, how to turn pain into texture, how to build rooms people feel safe in. Because she had learned something. Some families are made by blood, others are made by choice, and the strongest are made by both love and boundaries. One spring evening, Claire stood on the back porch, watching Lily ride her bike across the yard, her hair streaming behind her. Josh walked out and stood beside her, handing her a mug of tea. "Do you think she'll ever know everything?" he asked. Claire shook her head. "She won't need to. She'll just know she's loved." And that, Claire realized, was the only legacy that ever truly mattered. What part of Claire's journey resonated with you the most? Was there a moment that made you reflect on your own family or choices? If you felt moved by Claire's story, comment 100 below to let us know. And tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Thank you for watching Life Stories.